Coming up on Network Africa, Morocco recalls envoy in Berlin over Western Sahara disputes. Cameroon bans sale of automatic pistols over rising insecurity in the country. Plus, regent of South Africa's Zulu nation laid to rest in KwaZulu-Natal province. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in Morocco. The country has recalled its ambassador in Berlin because of Germany's stand over the disputed Western Sahara territory. Morocco said Germany had been involved in hostile actions that would harm the interests of the country. In a statement, Morocco cited Germany's, quote, destructive attitude and antagonistic activism regarding its actions that followed the U.S. decision to recognize Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. Last year, Germany called a UN Security Council meeting to discuss the issue after former U.S. President Donald Trump said Washington recognized Moroccan control on the disputed territory. On Thursday, Morocco also accused Germany of continued determination to counter Morocco's regional influence, referring to Germany's decision to exclude Morocco in an international meeting last year. While the German Foreign Ministry says it was surprised by Morocco's decision, but says it is also working closely to resolve the crisis. To security matters now, Cameroonian Minister Paul Atanga Nji has announced a ban on the sale of automatic pistols in the country, citing rising insecurity. The ban was announced after a meeting with gun sellers in the country. The Territorial Administration Minister said the number of guns owned by civilians was higher than the licenses issued to them. He says this poses a challenge to the government in tracking down gun owners and also posing a security threat to the country. In recent times, Cameroon has seen rising insecurity incidents. The European Union is considering sending a military training mission to Mozambique to help the government withstand a growing insurgency. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell clarified that the mission to Mozambique, if agreed, would be a military rather than civilian mission, meaning armed forces from EU states would send military instructors over to Mozambique. While Portugal is already sending its troops to help the country. Mozambique's government has been facing an Islamist insurgency since 2017, and rebels have stepped up attacks in the past year, threatening natural gas projects aimed at transforming the country's economy.
I updated ministers on our response to Mozambique's request for the European Union assistance to help to address the security situation and the territorial threat they are facing in the region of Cabo Delgado. Work is already ongoing. We are considering a potential European Union training mission. It will be a military mission. And Portugal has already offered half of the staff. In fact, Portugal has already sent in advance military instructors. But this Portuguese mission has to be considered as an advance, and they will be integrated on the European Union training mission if we finally agree on that. Frankly speaking, if we are not able to send this mission by the end of the year, and it would consider that not a good result. So I hope we will do it before.
The regent of South Africa's Zulu nation, Queen Mantfombi Dlamini Zulu, has been laid to rest. Her funeral took place at the Royal Palace in Ngoma in the early hours of the morning. The vigil was held overnight. She was buried according to Swati royal culture by a delegation sent by her brother, King Mswati III of Eswatini. The funeral was attended by family members from both monarchies. A state-funded memorial held also at the palace on Friday. Now that Queen Manfombi has been buried, the focus will now be on the squabbles over succession in the Zulu monarch. Factions within the royal family have brought a legal challenge to halt the naming of a successor after questioning the authenticity of the will of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, who died in March. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, joins us live on the program to tell us more about this. Hello, Betty. Do tell us, what is the mood like in South Africa at this time, especially the Zulu nation, now that the Queen has been laid to rest?
Well, as expected, it was quite sad, especially when the children of the late Queen paid tribute to her. Very heartbreaking speeches, especially by one of the daughters who talked about the pain, because the process of the sickness went from about 2016 up till the moment that she died. The process of physical pain that the Queen went through, still trying to carry herself with dignity, and the role she played in the royal house, role she played in promoting the culture. But more significantly, the speech of her first son, who is expected to be, or who is said to be one of the contenders for the throne, whose speech was read by one of his sisters, calling for unity in the royal house, that they admitted that there are issues, but these things need to be resolved, but they had to tackle them with togetherness as one. So it was quite emotional, very emotional ceremony that they had today. Everybody, paid a glowing tribute to the late Queen.
Well, is there any particular reason why the Queen was buried, according to Swati culture, when she was the regent of the Zulu kingdom?
Well, what you have to understand is that there isn't too much of a difference between the two cultures. Their languages are almost the same, like you have two different dialects. So they just found themselves in different countries, but they have the same ancestry. So there wouldn't be, and remember that the late regent was a princess. Her father, King Sobhuza II, is the father of the reigning king, who is a younger brother of the regent who died. So I'm sure there was a mingling of the culture. She was planted in the early hours of the morning, like her husband was buried as well. Planted means being buried for the royal family. So all that was observed. There was a strong delegation, definitely from Eswatini, which is her home country. But Eswatini is almost inside South Africa. So there is, the mingling of the culture is there because they have the same ancestry. But there isn't. She was still a queen and the chief wife in the royal house here. So if one was more, but you can't forget the fact that she's a princess, true blue blood.
Indeed. But, we know factions within the royal family have brought a legal challenge to halt the naming of a successor. And you said earlier that, her first son, who is poised to be the king, has called for unity. How soon, can we expect this new leader to, be coronated?
Since there's a little bit of a vacuum, there's nobody sitting on that throne right now. We expect that very soon. As I'm speaking with you, the will of the regent is being or supposed to be read at this point, because they said a local time 5 o'clock, that's your 4 o'clock. So maybe it's already started, but we don't still have, I haven't seen pictures of that. But we expect that to be found soon. And also it's noteworthy that the challenge by the first wife, Queen Sibongile Dlamini Zulu, who challenged the validity of the other marriages after her, has been put on hold. It's been taken out of the court roll. So the other challenges are those of the siblings of the late king, as well as the princesses challenging the validity of the will in court. Siblings, not in court, but there's squabbles. But we expect, and again, you can't really say Mr. Zulu, who is the first son. And although he came in surrounded by the Amabuto, that's the king's regiment, just like his father, making a statement, during the ceremony today, but you can't really say it till it's really pronounced. But the Prime Minister of the Zulu nation has said it that there was no doubt as to who the king, the late king, wanted to succeed him. Or we'll have to wait to find that out. And probably after the will and then the family meeting, then we'll get to hear. But I'm sure that will happen sooner than later.
All right, then. Thank you so much, our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia.
Thank you.
The African Union's health agency has welcomed U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to waive intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines, but he counseled patience as the move would take time to translate into reality. Mr. Biden had endorsed calls for a waiver on vaccine patents in a sharp reversal of the U.S. position, but the move upset big pharmaceutical firms that have been producing these vaccines. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa also welcomed the statement and said in Parliament his country would like to manufacture vaccines locally against this pandemic as well as the future ones.
As a country, we want to manufacture vaccines locally against this pandemic and future pandemics. It is for this reason that South Africa and India proposed the TRIPS waiver at the World Trade Organization to enable manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines in developing countries. And now we welcome the statement by the United States administration that it will support the TRIPS waiver on intellectual property protection for COVID-19 vaccines.
The IMF and Tunisia have been having discussions regarding the economic reform program for the country. IMF spokesperson Gary Rice says the technical discussions currently focus on understanding the details of their plans for the program. The IMF adds that they are ready to support Tunisia and the Tunisian people to cope with the impact of the crisis and move forward to an inclusive drawbridge recovery and restore sustainable finances.
Can confirm that the fund staff met with the Tunisian authorities here in Washington earlier this week, and they shared with us indeed their economic reform program, and our technical discussions currently focus on understanding the details of their plans for that economic reform program. The authorities have requested a 3-year financial arrangement, again to help continue the fight against the pandemic and build forward to more inclusive growth. I can tell you discussions have progressed well, with details yet to be ironed out on the potential magnitude of that financial assistance and on the authorities' reform program that would be the complement to any financial arrangement from the IMF. So the exact final amount will depend on Uganda's estimated balance of payments needs and the strength of policies the authorities commit to implement.
Somalia says it is restoring diplomatic ties with neighboring Kenya after it severed relations in December, accusing Nairobi of meddling in its affairs. Relations between the two countries have also been tense over the ownership of potential oil and gas deposits, some of which lie off the coast of Jubaland, one of Somalia's 5 semi-autonomous states. Now the two governments have agreed to keep friendly relations based on principles of mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. A statement from Somalia also thanked Qatar Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, who is credited with playing a part in the reconciliation, and said the tour had been welcomed by Kenya. Nairobi said it took note of the statement and is looking forward to further normalization of relations by the Somali authorities. Still ahead on the program, our Africa Tech segment takes a look at how to improve funding for tech startups in Nigeria. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. An inclusive education advocate has developed a digital platform that will connect parents of children living with disabilities to therapists. The application, called TheraConnect, will help parents get help and book sessions from the comfort of their homes. Omotoke Olugbode is a teacher and inclusive education advocate who is working to bring therapy closer to children living with disabilities, especially autism spectrum disorders. Her drive to develop a platform that connects parents of children with special needs to therapists was born out of her passion to provide every child with quality education, irrespective of their disability, mental health, and socio-economic background.
I actually read the story of a mother who has a child with autism, and she was struggling. And it dawned on me at that moment that if we have a parent who is living in the US and they are still struggling with this, then I'm quite sure that we have parents here in Nigeria who do not even know that this is what their child has, because autism has no physical features. And so many times, these children go undiagnosed, unassessed, till they become adults. And that was the first thing that struck me about it.
While experts say there is currently no cure for autism spectrum disorder, interventions such as applied behavioral analysis therapy are important to help such persons improve their everyday skills, which allows them to become more independent.
You know, most times parents want therapy that are affordable, that are efficient, and most times they can't get access to these therapies. And therapy is not something that you stop for a child hoping to continue later, because when you stop, the skills that the child has learned, the child begins to regress on those skills. And that was when the idea of TheraConnect came up.
To promote the inclusion of children with special needs and without creating another center for such children, Toke decided to develop TheraConnect to make therapy easily accessible.
TheraConnect is an online mobile platform that connects parents that have children with disability to therapies that are very close to their location. So if you set up your location as Yaba, you get therapies within Yaba. If you set up your location as Gigondo, you get therapies within that location.
Omotoke says she's working with her team to develop a USSD code to make it easier for parents that are not technologically inclined to get the required services for their children. Welcome to our Africa Tech segments. In a report published by Intelligence by TechPoint Africa, $219 million was raised by tech startups in Nigeria in the first quarter of 2021, a figure higher than that of the last three first quarters combined. Funding is one of the most important components for a startup, especially if they intend to grow quickly, or whether it's for faster development, better marketing, or sales. Without a reliable funding source in place, some startups tend to struggle to achieve significant traction, develop next-generation products, or hire top-tier talent, and more. Well, joining us now to shed more light on how we can improve funding for the ecosystem is Tomi Balogun, an investment advisor. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Tech.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, despite a drop in total funding, it appears African startups have closed more deals in 2020 and 2021 than previous years. What would you attribute this increase in seed rounds to, especially amid this pandemic and previous lockdowns?
Honestly, if you ask me, I believe that the pandemic actually showed the need for more digital companies and more tech companies and more companies use building tech-enabled products, right? So with the pandemic and everything that happened in 2020, it became quite obvious that we had to move forward to the future a lot sooner. So we saw a lot of tech-enabled companies in fintech, in health, in e-commerce as well come up, right? So there was a lot of interest on African-focused tech companies because there was a clear need for companies like that, especially with what happened with the pandemic. So I think that that was a key reason why we saw an increase in funding for startups in Africa and in Nigeria. Of course, Nigeria always takes the lion's share in terms of startup funding on the African continent, right? So, and of course, we have strong entrepreneurial, system and ecosystem in Nigeria as well. So that's what I believe was one of the main reasons for the increase in startup funding for Nigeria.
Well, per tech, Africa ranked Nigeria as the top destination for venture capital markets. What do you think? Should we be expecting a raise or a slump in this second quarter?
I don't know. I wouldn't expect a slump. But I think that we should, be optimistic about the future, and I look forward to a raise. And that's because Nigeria and Lagos remains a key entrepreneurial ecosystem in Africa and in the rest of the world as well. We've seen in the past few months companies like Paystack, get acquired by Stripe. We saw Flutterwave become a unicorn as well. This has brought a lot more attention and a lot more focus on startups in the African space, and especially in big countries like Nigeria, Egypt, the big countries in Africa. So I look forward to more capital coming into Africa, more capital coming into Nigeria. So honestly, I think that, and I expect a raise in startup funding for tech startups in Nigeria. In addition, the pandemic also opened up a lot of people to get interested in investing, right? And of course, the Paystack story and the Flutterwave story as well got a lot of people interested in VC and private equity investing. So we see a lot more VC funds coming up. We see former tech founders setting up VC funds as well to invest in tech startups. So I think there's a lot more interest. There's a lot more funding available. So I expect a raise in 2021.
Well, Tommy, would you agree that, despite the commendable performance in past years, there seems to be more foreign investments than local ones? And what do you think, is the reason for this, if you agree?
A couple of reasons, right? I feel like one is awareness. In terms of the local investors, not a lot of them were aware or are aware about the investment opportunities. You find that access is quite restricted to closed communities or closed parties. If you look at the Paystack story, how many people knew when Paystack was raising funding? How many people knew when Flutterwave was raising funding? And because these companies are not, they're not really in the public space. They really just raise it in private quarters before it comes to the public space. And by the time it comes to the public space, it's already late. And of course, the Silicon Valley story is quite popular. It's quite popular as well. So a lot of startups look to Silicon Valley or look to international investors for funding. I mean, with good reason, because they have good precedence with raising funding for startups. And they also believe that once we get funding from the international parties, the local investors will get more interested, right? And there's also education. For a lot of the local investors, there's still a lot more education that needs to come into the space about how VC investing works, about how private equity investing works, to understand the risk associated with that kind of investing, and to know that it is not guaranteed, right? You can actually lose your money. 1 in 10 startups fail, or even a worse, value for those numbers. So it's a lot of education. So I feel like in the past 1 year, the stories that have come to bear in the African tech startup space would increase more local investor appetite for investing in tech startups.
All right, Tommy, just a very quick one. Are you optimistic about the future for local funding in Nigeria?
I am. I'm absolutely optimistic because I'm optimistic with caution, right? I'm optimistic because there's strength in numbers. We definitely have the numbers in Nigeria. 60% of our population still remain unbanked. Huge opportunity for fintech, huge opportunity for education, huge opportunity for health as well, and across the board. numbers. We also have a better internet penetration and also phone penetration as well. We're also building a talent pool, right? We see companies like Talent QL coming up. We see global tech giants like Google setting up a global developer space. Facebook is also looking to set up an office in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria. So all of that should be huge, right? But then my caution will be the political system, right? Because we do exist in a political system. So because of that, I would stick with caution. We really have a case where there's increasing insecurity concerns. You know, I think we need more political will to steer us toward, right?
So being optimistic with caution. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting conversation. Tomi Balogun, investment advisor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's it on the program today. Thank you a lot for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Have a great weekend.